Men, we doing okay? On one end, we've got Harry Styles prancing around in dresses, Drake wearing nail polish, and on the other end, you've got Andrew Tate acting like a total D-bag. But in reality, it seems like the modern man is doing just fine. We're going to therapy, we're in touch with our feelings, we're learning how to be great dads and co-parent with our spouses. Which begs the question, what does masculinity even look like these days? In this episode of the Examine Life podcast, I interview Scott Haber, an executive and leadership coach who helps people connect deeply with their emotions. We discuss how anger and fierceness are natural parts of masculinity that can be channeled in healthy ways, how fully feeling negative emotions helps us heal our core wounds and set boundaries, and how to lead from a place of empowered autonomy as opposed to controlling and dominating mindset. I hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome, everybody, to the Examine Life podcast. My name is Khe Hy. This is a podcast where we deconstruct some of life's thorniest questions in a philosophical and pragmatic way so that you can live a more intentional, productive, and joyful life. Today's guest is Scott Haber, and our question is, what does healthy masculinity look like? What's up, Scott?
Good to be here, Kay. I love the questions you're asking.
I'm excited to jump in. So before we jump in, I had asked you the last time we met, tell us the story of Scott Haber in a series of chapters. Like, what would the spine of your book look like?
Yeah.
Your book of life.
And I'm certain that, the writing of the story will be different depending on who the publisher is. And so as it stands today, I think there was the first chapter, which was really finding out what I enjoyed and how to come to myself and find out what I intrinsically enjoyed. And so that was moving away from pre-med and a doctor's path into a serial entrepreneur and biomedical engineer, making medical devices and finding the enjoyment through blending science and business. I think the next phase was really coming into myself, how I can find enjoyment that wasn't dictated based on the external world or achievements or gold stars, which looked like a lot of studying of mindfulness, nature-based mindfulness, and eventually going on a scholarship funded by David Bonderman to travel to non-Western cultures with no responsibility besides seeing different stories of people. I'd say, after that, the final phase, which I'm in now more so, is how can I feel most deeply everything that arises as the path to joy, freedom, and love that I want, and how can I teach that to others as part of the intimacy, business, or life that they want to create?
Beautiful. Say that again. How do I feel?
Yeah. How can I feel everything that's present as the most authentic path to the joy, freedom, and love that I want?
The joy, freedom, and love. Feel everything that needs to be felt. I think that a lot of our listeners are already listening to this and saying, wait a minute, what does this mumbo jumbo mean? I will warn you, Scott, our listeners are very heady, very cerebral, very secular, very solutions oriented. If you're familiar with an Enneagram, they're Enneagram 3s, mostly. We're going to talk about what that means. But actually, so let's talk about it now. If I'm a skeptic, I'm a hard-charging medical device science person like you are in chapter 1.
Mhm.
And I'm like, what the fuck does that mean? How would you explain it to me?
And the what is applied to?
The feeling, the joy, love, and I can't paraphrase it, but what would you just describe? And feel free to repeat it again, because I do want that to sit with myself. Obviously, you've said it twice, and I've still not internalized it. And so I wanted to sit with our listeners. So actually say that again and then explain to it in more layperson's terms.
Yeah, that feeling, everything that I'm presently feeling is the path towards the freedom, joy, and love that I want. So I think what I mean by that in a more practical and pragmatic sort of frame here is that we often depend on the external world to feel a certain way of what's the easiest way to get quick hits of dopamine or validation, if I do good at my job, if I have a good workout, if I have a sugary snack, if my lover likes me, which are ways to feel good, but they're dependent on the world outside of us to create the way we want to feel inside of us. And most often we're being dependent on the world outside of us to feel a certain way because we don't like the way we feel inside of us. So it's rather than feel the way that we feel inside of us, what's the easiest hit of good feelings that I can get outside of me? And that might feel good for a little bit, but it's not authentic. It's not resilient. It's not based on you authentically being with what you're feeling and what is. And so I found the more I can feel everything and let it know it has a home, the more I find that's always the experience I've been looking for. That in my sadness is joy, and my grief is the beauty and the preciousness of life, and my fear is a lot of love. And if I'm going everywhere outside of me to look for that to escape what feels bad, I'll never actually get enduringly the experiences I'm looking for.
Wow. Beautifully said. And I'll admit that if you had said this to me even a year ago, I would have still felt confused. I think I can hear words, but I can't, to use your to be meta or to be direct, I can't embody or I can't actually feel the words that I'm hearing, right? They're just words on a piece of paper to me. But I will say, as someone who just stuffed, half a bar of dark chocolate in his mouth in anticipation of this podcast, who was a heavy drinker for all of adulthood, 28 years. The question that I have actually sat with personally when I've basically not stopped, but cut my drinking by like 95%. And the question that I always ask myself when I feel that urge, when I feel that unsettledness, that frustration, is what am I unwilling to feel at this moment? And I think that what I've realized, to maybe act as the translator to our listeners to some of the things that you've said, is that there was this nagging uneasiness with myself. My old former teacher, spiritual teacher, coach, Andrew Tate, he called it dissatisfaction. There was a kind of an enduring basic dissatisfaction. And to kind of triangulate what you said, a lot of that dissatisfaction has always been papered over in my own life with quick dopamine hits. Chocolate, salt, Twitter, coffee, sex, you name it, right? Drugs, alcohol, weed. The list goes on and on and on and on. And sometimes they're even very healthy things like reading a productivity book, or which are seemingly healthy things. And so I'd love to ask you how that central essence of dissatisfaction, the thing that we're numbing away or that we're unwilling to feel.
Yeah. The super deep question.
Where does that come from?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I appreciate you sharing all your sort of tactic strategies, because I know them all very well too. I thought that I was, but really doing the work because my days were spent in meditation and walking in the forest. And no, look, I'm sitting with myself. So I must not be avoiding anything. And I didn't realize it was just the same thing happening at a different level of how can I use these practices to create flow and spaciousness so I don't have to feel things that trigger me or that feel uneaseful or dissatisfying. And, there are different levels of health to it, but any version of escaping yourself is ultimately will map to addiction and unhealthfulness. So,
and to translate for folks, you're saying that you can be an avid meditator, you can be deep on a spiritual path and still be escaping using meditation, let's keep it very simple, to escape that feeling of dissatisfaction.
Yeah, I think John Kabat-Zinn, who, is one of the pioneers of Western mindfulness. He's an MD, started mindfulness-based stress reduction, MBSR, called it a prison of peace, which is like anytime something bad comes up, why don't you just go to your breath or go to the present moment to not feel what feels bad, which is very much like, why don't you just go to the bar of chocolate or go to the TV to not feel what feels bad? It might be a more nuanced and contemplative way to do it, but it's still, in essence, doing it. Yeah.
Is that a critique? For those who aren't familiar, John Kabat-Zinn is like the OG of Western meditation, I think. All right. Is that a known, you don't have to, if it's your critique, sure, but is that a known critique of mindfulness in circles? Like that's not I'm unfamiliar with, I know spiritual bypass, but I'm unfamiliar with critiques of meditation in that vein.
Yeah, I think it's on the fringe, and I don't think everybody's doing it. But the question is, meditation can be a path deeply to ourselves and wholeness in what we're looking for, of realizing truly who we are. And are we looking at it to feel and inquire most deeply to what's actually presently alive? Or are we using it to, how do I get space from this thing that bothers me and not actually have to feel it? And so I don't know if I'd call it a critique, but there are different use cases of it.
Thank you for clarifying that. God, this like when meditation is causing you problems, then we know that we're in dangerous waters. Can I share with you, Scott, something that has really helped me, and maybe it will help frame some of the things we're going to talk about. We're not even in the question yet, but this is beautiful. I recently was reading, I've been reading a lot of Pema Chodron, When Things Fall Apart. There was a loss in our family, and that has been an anchor in kind of a sea of just feeling a lot. And there's one of the things she describes, it's a lesson of Buddhism, I think. I usually butcher a lot of the semantics in Eastern philosophy, but she mentions the 8 worldly dharmas. And it's humans seek to avoid, they seek pleasure and they look to avoid pain. They seek fame and they seek to avoid criticism. They seek praise and they want to avoid like shame or something like that. And then the last pair is they seek gains. They want to gain things and they hate losing things. Now, on the quote unquote negative side of the ledger, right? Criticism, loss, pain. I suspect that this is my interpretation of it. I'd love to hear your thought. I suspect that for a long time, I believed that what I'll call maybe negative feelings, probably not the right way, but I think you know what I mean. The goal was to run away and avoid negative feelings as much as possible. And then on the flip side of it, to double down, triple down, quintuple down, 10x, to use productivity bro speak, on the gains, all the positive sides. Now, my understanding is that the way she would describe it is that life is all of these things at the same time. Right? You're constantly gaining something and losing something. And to really experience life, to feel life in the most authentic way, as you described it, is the ability to exist maybe at peace. That's my addition, amidst the positive feelings and the negative feelings.
Yeah.
How does that vibe with the kind of how you see the world, your teachings, your worldview?
Yeah, there's a few elements in there. So I want to pull 2 of them apart. One of like, is your worldview to be at peace with it all? And second, avoiding negative feelings, and sort of, is that just part of human nature? And what does that mean? Which kind of gets back to the first question of the root of dissatisfaction.
Well, wow. Go nuts.
Let's do the first part. I think the way I understand it, just for what works for me, is to be able to welcome it all, to deeply embrace and feel it all without clinging to or pushing away any of it, which is the same sort of basic philosophy of meditation with thoughts. And it's how can we do that also with our feelings, just like children who are going to go through, like, your children are going to go through a whole range of emotion, from temper tantrums in grocery stores to wanting popsicles and crying to being delighted at getting candy. And it's like, how can I love them in all of it and welcome them to be who they are in all of it without needing to change any of it? And to me, that's a real good recipe for not only peace, but it's a really effective form of productivity and cultivating flow. So, yeah.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I love that. One thing that really struck me as a parent, just a very thin strand of that, is when I was growing up and I would cry, my parents would commonly say to me, "Stop crying." And that when I became a parent, I would say to my kid, when they would cry, I would say, "Stop crying." And my wife Lisa would point out to me, she's like, "No, you have to let them feel what they're feeling. You know, telling someone to stop crying is to tell them to turn off this vital part of who they are."
Yes.
I know that many of the listeners will probably very innocuously, like, we all want to be parent the right way, but I wonder what you think. You know, what you said made me think of the phrase of a parent telling a kid, "Stop crying." I wonder what you think about kind of the
Yeah, I'm
stop
just
crying.
thinking of all the innocuous, like slightly sinister ways that it's worked into our language and our gestures. You know, when you're asked somebody what's going on, if they're in the midst of sadness, we say, "What's wrong?" Like something is wrong with their sadness and not just part of the normal human gamut of emotion. Or if the normal face you see people crying is like this, like I need to cover my tears because I can't be seen in it. So I think from very early ages, you know, it's totally, sorry, fucking normal. I don't know
No,
what,
curse away.
it's totally fucking normal to have the whole gamut of emotions. You know, we evolved with feelings for a reason. They tell us about how our body's sensing the world. And to learn from young ages that don't throw a temper tantrum, cheer up, don't be sad, you should be happy, actually says a large part of ourselves is not safe to express.
Wow.
Yeah.
Got it. And so the second part, I'm almost forgetting the second part of the question, but you remember it. I think
you were asking the question, you know, what is the root of
pleasure versus pain?
Pleasure versus pain, and this root of this like pervasive sort of chronic, ubiquitous dissatisfaction that most of us have to a low or not so low level underneath the surface of the hood.
Our listeners have it to a high degree.
Yeah.
I've had it for a high degree, and conversations like these have lessened it with time.
And I would say high productivity could be bonded to it often. If I do more, then I will feel better. So let me create, and I'm not sure that's going on for everyone. I just know that in my system or with some clients, let me do more to hopefully bet on the expectation of future good feels to get good feelings that I'm missing now. And, you know, you can build a whole life around that.
Yeah. Is there an example, obviously not singling people, is there an example? Like, what does that look like to build a life?
Sure.
Because I think of that, like, I call that living for tomorrow, or the delayed life plan. Like, I rather take happiness tomorrow. And I think it's really powerful in kind of Western and like the self-reliant, you know, man or person, which is, you know, sacrifice today for better tomorrow, delay. What does that look like when you search for that better feeling tomorrow and you basically trade today's good feeling for a better tomorrow? Like, play that out for us.
Yeah. I mean, I think you can sort of see it everywhere where people are in jobs or relationships or livelihoods that feel like they can't be their authentic selves, where they feel estranged from. And it's with this hope of some future reward will come that will make this all worth it, because I will have that one moment of joy when my partner does this, when my job rewards me with this, when I have this esteem, which goes back to the start. It's making our good feelings dependent on the world outside of us. Thinking, you know, once we get to a certain place, then there will be some arrival. That arrival we're looking for is our own self-love. And our own self-love doesn't come from the return and the reward and the pleasure we get from external tasks and worldly tasks. It doesn't mean those things don't look good, or don't feel good, but there is a certain holistic, comprehensive love you can have for yourself that's irrespective on whether things are going bad or good. And so it doesn't have you then just seeking and chasing the next promotion, the newest partner, the newest car, the newest house, because like, oh, I actually already feel solid in myself and I don't need those things to feel solid. But that doesn't mean that you might not have an authentic desire to get them. It means that you're not locating your own sense of being able to be loved, to receive love, and to give love based on having it.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, I think that we could talk about this forever, but I think this will segue into our question. On today's question is, what does healthy masculinity look like? Before we dive in, we run coaching cohorts. So if you're looking for peers, like-minded friends, professionals, community members to have these types of conversations, check out radreads.co/coaching. So what does healthy masculinity look like? And maybe let me ask you first, why is masculinity an interesting topic for you, Scott?
Dude, masculinity feels like how I'm relating to the world. Like how I relate to anything is how I relate to everything. And so my relationships feel like the deepest mirror to my own development and how much I love myself and then how much I can love everything else outside of me. And so masculinity sort of feels like a vector for me of, as a man, showing up relating to clients, to a romantic partner, to friends. Like, how can I relate from a place that fosters more love and openness and freedom? And I think we often look at that through this sort of constricted box of what's masculinity and what does it mean to be a healthy man in a modern society.
And what a great question. What does it mean to be a healthy man in a modern society? So if you were to rewind the clock, and I'm happy to rewind it myself, like if you think of yourself as, young Scott Haber, before you're a teenager, 6, 7, 8, 9, and I was interviewing that child right now, like what is masculinity? You probably didn't know exactly what masculinity mean, but maybe what does it mean to be a man? Or what would that have looked like to a child, Scott Haber? What did masculinity look like to you? And if you want to give that some thought, I'm happy to answer it myself.
Yeah, a picture comes to mind, which I think we're giving really traditional pictures for like who is most celebrated or the celebrities are most successful. Like that is the trajectory or the map for like what an evolved man looks like. And often that looks like athletes that are really strong and fit and have made a lot of money, or like ideas of handsome, strong, movie stars who have this like strength and verge and like courage and like suck it up and, wipe off the cut on your knee. And I think that's sort of the idea that we're giving. It's strength over vulnerability. Yeah.
I think I would say similar for me. Definitely would think kind of movie stars, I would actually, in my answer, there would probably be a little more aggression in it. So like almost like WWF type, like that, like there, to me, I think the element of fighting and combat would be kind of wrapped in the definition of masculinity as a child and probably even today. And for me, it's interesting as well, being a child of Asian immigrants. There's like masculinity and there's like, what is an Asian male as a sub node of the masculinity question look like? But to me, culturally, I like, it's funny. The first thing that came to mind was like the Marlboro Man. I'm like, that's masculinity to Khe as a child, like smoking a Marlboro Red and out in nature. I wonder.
I want to double click on something you're saying because I think it's important. I think that there is evolutionarily and biologically the imprint for combat and strength and fighting to be part of masculinity because what it did was keep the tribe or the surrounding people safe. And I think we have a chance for that same still like core disposition and emotional signature to happen, but that doesn't actually cause hurt on other people, which looks like healthy anger. Anger tells me what I care about and how it got violated. And when I really allow my anger to move without suppressing it or directing it at other people, I know what I stand for and I know what my boundaries are to keep the things that I care about. And so that healthy anger, it takes on like the traditional form of like the masculine role to be able to feel hurt and pain and decide what needs to be done to keep the tribe and people itself and then people it loves safe, but without taking that out on harming others.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. So is it almost like healthy anger also means, it doesn't mean no violence, right? It means violence in the sense, violence maybe like where you're protecting yourself, or it means violence when violence is appropriate and no violence when violence is inappropriate. Am I paraphrasing correctly, or is that too bit of?
Not exactly. I think that's an important point that I learned from Daniel Schmachtenberger and how his father raised him. He's really a brilliant thinker. And he used to say, his dad told him, never be the one to throw the first punch. But if someone throws the first punch, make sure your punch is the last. And yeah, I'm not advocating. Yeah. I think a lot of
deep, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
You say you're not advocating.
You know, there's obviously a situation for it. And more what I'm speaking of is, I think a lot of violence happens because people can't feel the way they've been hurt, or they can't feel the way that they've might have let their boundaries get violated. And it's sort of like that emotion that's been controlled starts to control them, where it reaches this boiling point in a simmer where the energy of the emotion's too much. It needs an outlet. And because we don't know how to move it ourselves and just without directing it at someone else, we need a place to place it. And so we often put it on people. And for me, like the first answer is when I feel hurt, like I get angry, I go yell, I then see the hurt and the care underneath. And then I know the boundary of what do I need to not be hurt in the future? What do I need to be able to keep my heart open in love, which often isn't violent at all. It's extremely compassionate. Like, hey, if you're going to yell at me, then I'll walk away. Or if you're going to abuse me, then, I'll take the day off and I'll come see you tomorrow.
Yeah. Wow. If you think of, I want to come back to that, but if you think of masculinity and kind of how it's evolved, so we kind of, I'm probably older than you, but you work in the same generation of like the actor, the athlete, and so on, of like masculinity. We were probably growing up in the 90s. And you take masculinity today in 2023. I don't even know how I'd answer this question, but what does masculinity look like today? I know it's a big question.
Yeah, I don't know I have the answer to that. I know it's evolving. And I know there are more discourses like this where we realize vulnerability is strength. Sensitivity is power. Feeling things is courageous. You can lead without stripping down people's autonomy. You can lead in a way that actually empowers people more. And that's the definition I hope it's going towards. I guess I'm curious for you. Yeah. What do you think in 2023 masculine is defined as?
I agree. And I think part of how we gravitated, how our friendship is evolving is because of some shared belief of what, worldview of what you just said. I do, I think about maybe and I'm not necessarily, I'm definitely not the right cultural commentator. But if I look at some of the tropes or narratives of like the media, and again, what does that even mean in 2023? I think there's definitely like a story that like men have forgotten what it's like to be men. They've gotten too soft. They've become too in touch with their emotions. There's kind of like the blurring of genders in some regards. They do. Too passive. And I'll even speak from experience. Like, I think that, if I take some of the tropes, like I'm a very sensitive man. I'm very willing to share my vulnerability with my wife. I dress very like, what would have been called heterosexual, metrosexual.
Metrosexual.
Metrosexual. 15 years ago is kind of like the default style for men, mainstream men. And so, you can go far as, men are wearing, Harry Styles is wearing dresses, Drake is wearing nail polish and like things like that. I actually went to my wife the other day. I was wondering I wanted to wear nail polish once. What do you think? She's like, absolutely not. Absolutely not. She's like, who do you think you are? But I think there is this, I don't know, it's like this, again, I hate, some part of me hates having this conversation because I'm sure a lot of it can be taken misconstrued, but there is like a feminization of men. If Harry Styles is wearing a dress, there's some feminization of men. Again, I think that might be a controversial statement, and we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
I think we're in a calibration phase. I don't know what's right or wrong, but I think that there was an over calibration to the female, like look at the 50s, 60s, the female is the housewife and she doesn't have purpose or mission, and her purpose is to serve the husband, and he's the core breadwinner and he can't possibly have vulnerability. And, feminism really birthed out of that to realize how fucked up that idea was. And so I think it's sort of like anything in culture where we swung too much one way, and in trying to figure out where is the healthy middle, we're swinging maybe, who knows, this is just my idea of it, but too much the other way, because we're actually trying to ask, okay, there's been, a woman has both feminine and masculine parts. A male has both masculine and feminine parts, and we've stripped them down of their complementary pole. And so we're trying to say, what does it look like to allow and embrace that again for a whole complementary balanced human? And some people, in figuring out what that means, might have a different definition or might go more in one way than the other, which I think I hear you speaking to.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, no, I think, like, I know, again, I could speak firsthand when my wife has, has said to me, she's like, I want you to be, she's like, I've thought about doing combat sports. It's a hobby. She's like, I would love for you to do more combat sports, because I think even in my own world, like I've swung too far in her eyes of being a softer, more emotionally regulated person, where what she sees is like, if we got jumped in a back alley, like, would this soft man, actually defend my honor or defend us or defend our family? And so it's like an interesting thing to see. At the same time, she would not want me to be like, you belong in the kitchen, make my dinner, and I'm going to go drink whiskey with my friends. So it's kind of like, I do think that there is this kind of collapsing. And the other thing I want to add, and I don't know where exactly it fits in, it probably is tangential. Again, I don't think either of us are cultural commentators in that regards, but the whole kind of Andrew Tate, movement of just like, men are the dominant gender, and, fighting and violence and all that. It does feel like we're at a moment with a lot of whiplash where, maybe I'm on the softer side. I'm moving towards the, I'm using air quotes here, the softer side of masculinity. Andrew Tate's pulling others onto the more aggressive side of masculinity, and Scott Haber is guiding us to the truth.
Yeah, I don't know about that part. But there's some interesting, I think, false dichotomies in what you're saying that are worth unraveling. First off, on the Andrew Tate thing, we can obviously see that whole movement as a response to the miscalibration. Like, no, don't forget what's important about masculinity. And, in my own experience in own life, being able to feel my feelings fully, nothing about that makes me not fiercely loving. Fierceness is a part of masculinity. I think just looking at sort of traditional heterosexual relationships, women are looking for the fierce, ravishing energy of a male. And it's only when I'm not afraid of my anger, or when I'm not afraid of my own fear, can I really fully step into this sort of core loving fierceness. But that isn't, on the far right, this compensation for let me always be fierce because I don't want to show that I actually have softness. To me, those actually go hand in hand, where there's nothing that really sounds soft about my anger when I'm releasing my anger. And if somebody were violating my physical or my lover's physical needs, there'd be nothing soft about my response. And in allowing the fierceness of my anger to move, I'm able to come back to the most loving response that isn't afraid of the anger, the fear, the shame, or the emotional consequences for how others will respond. And sometimes that's super fierce, like if somebody's violating physical needs, and sometimes that's super loving. And those often aren't separate.
Could you give a more specific example of that?
Yeah.
Because I could see you're combining this fierceness with, and I might be hearing you wrong, but you're combining this fierceness that can be manifested with anger and simultaneously with love.
Yeah, I got a good example. I'm going to paint like 3 different ways this can go about.
Okay.
You know, I've had times where I felt in an abusive relationship where I was the one receiving toxicity or abuse. On one end of the spectrum, if I'm not feeling the anger, then I'm actually not feeling the part of me that feels violated and that I got hurt. So I don't know where to set a boundary. So I stay in shutdown because I'm afraid of the anger, and I stay taking abuse.
Got it.
This looks
So
like...
let me pause you. Yeah. So when your anger, like the person being abused, so you're basically you're repressing your anger because you're almost scared of it, or you don't want to feel it.
That is the device to keep you and others safe in a healthy way. And so that's not even if I'm being abused, that's if I'm watching other people that I care about being abused, who I feel a sense of identity with and a sense of investment to their safety. You know, my anger tells me something not right is happening that I care about. And if I don't feel the anger, I don't actually know what I need to do to protect the care. So on one end, that looks like sort of emasculated, which is let us stay in abuse because we're not connected to the protector part. On the other end, the Andrew Tate end, I don't know what Andrew Tate does, but I have the sense of when our anger isn't clean and flowing and we're hyper masculinized of everything fierce, it's not actually mindful how the anger is getting released. So it's just like, I'm being violated. Fuck you, man. How dare you do that at the littlest thing? So it's like not
step on your shoes or something.
Totally. Step on your shoes and not feel the way that you feel threatened fully by that. So you're just in reaction to take the threat on someone else.
Got it. Wow. Okay.
It's like,
let's recap those. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
So the first one is I'm being abused, or I'm seeing abuse, and I'm not even able to connect to my anger. Is it because I'm just like subconsciously, like I'm numbing it, or I'm just avoiding it, disassociating from it?
In some way, it usually goes down to, like we were talking about with children, we learned anger wasn't okay or was unsafe.
Just hold it, don't feel it, right?
Yeah.
And so the abuse would continue because you're unable to see that it's problematic, or you're unable to see to set a boundary.
You're not feeling the thing that wants to tell you where the boundary is.
Can you be a little more specific on what? Like, I hear what you're saying, but I don't think I fully understand it.
Yeah, when I really feel angry about something, when I let myself release that anger, it almost always turns into, first, it's like, no, I won't stand for this, as I'm feeling the anger, and that anger turns into some deep sadness or hurt. And in really feeling the sadness or hurt, I know then of, if I don't want to feel this anymore, or if I don't want to be put in a situation where I'm unnecessarily subjected to this, what do I need to do to not be subjected to this? What actions can I take to keep myself safe? Yeah. And so anger really tells us this really vulnerable part of ourselves that got hurt. And the more I allow the anger to clarify and tell me what got hurt and what I'm actually not okay with, the more the boundaries just natural.
Got it.
If you're yelling at me and I'm not feeling how I feel angry, but I'm just like shut down of like, this feels bad, I don't actually know what really
Like,
feels bad to me and what I'm not okay with. The anger is the
yeah,
start of telling me what I'm not okay with.
got it. Got it. And then the anger in the example you gave could be sadness
Is it?
or shame. Shame probably a very powerful. I'm thinking about, I have friends when they see their older siblings as
Is it?
adults, they the older siblings kind of everyone regresses to childhood and they start like verbally
Is it?
belittling the younger sibling. And so I could see right there that you could just shut it down, make a joke, or just move on, like
Is
pretend
it?
like it never happened. But the anger, then if you can experience that anger, like, fuck, they're making fun of me again. I'm a
And this feels
40-year-old
bad.
person.
Yeah.
This sucks. And then it might be a gateway to sadness, like, I
And
can't
there's
believe my
nothing,
older sibling
this is a
disrespects me
really
that.
important distinction that you're helping me articulate more clearly. There's nothing wrong with feeling the sadness or shame. It's not like we're trying to draw a
Yeah.
boundary to not feel bad. It's more like when I notice my siblings yelling at me and I feel fully down to what's happening, oh, that makes me feel sad and bad. Then I get to see clearly, oh, I'm not okay with being belittled or abused. This is how it actually authentically makes me feel. There's nothing wrong with the feeling, but I get to feel fully what's happening. And it's not like this kink of like, oh, well, they do that all the time and it's not me. Or it's like, no, just fuck that, dude. It's more like, oh,
Yeah.
this is how I feel and this is what I'm not okay with. And it's not that I'm not okay with the feeling. It's more, I don't want to subject myself to something that makes me
Yeah.
feel abused or belittled.
Which then leads to the potential boundary. Like that person could feel
Totally.
the anger and then turn to their siblings like, hey, I know that we've done this for decades, but it really hurts me when you tease me this way as an adult.
Totally.
Like,
And,
yeah,
the boundary being, if you're going to continue to tease me this way, what I'm going to do is walk away for an hour and I'll call you back later. What I'm going to do is ask you to stop teasing me. And if you can't, then, I'm going to go get lunch and we can talk another time.
yeah,
Which then,
yeah,
which is the most compassionate and loving thing you can do for the person because it signals to them, hey, this behavior isn't okay with me. And so I cannot resent you and stay in connection and love. This is what I need.
yeah,
And
yeah.
this is what I'll do
Wow.
if that happens.
Yeah. Whereas most people, at least that I know, would just deflect, avoid, seethe in private later, and then continue that, numb with like have a drink to make it, go away and then repeat the cycle.
And then feel some sort of resentment at the person as it continues to happen. Or have some sort of story, self-fulfilling prophecy that it's always going to happen because the feeling is still happening in you consistently.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for breaking that down so scientifically. It's super helpful. So that was one end. So you ignore the feeling, and then the resentment, and you don't set the boundary. The other one is someone steps on your shoe at a bar, and you just like punch them in the face. So it's like unhinged anger and unhinged aggression. Was there anything more to add on that one?
Yeah, I think it's important. It's actually the same thing, but a different behavioral compensation. They both don't know how to fully feel the anger. So one doesn't feel the anger and allows it to happen because the anger is too much of a threat, so they don't set the boundary. The other doesn't feel the anger, and because it's too threatening to feel how they got hurt to their masculinity or how they feel unsafe, rather than fully feel the hurt, they're just like, it's your fucking problem. Fuck you, don't do this again because I don't want to feel this. And so it's like hurt people. When you can't fully feel the hurt, if you're not going to push it down, you just want to blame it on the other person of, oh, I can't feel the hurt myself, so it's your problem. So I need to take out some action to let you know how wrong you are, which really just perpetuates. I mean, that's the whole war mentality, right? That's why we've been caught in war for how many years?
Yeah. Wow. Hurt people. Yeah. I have said that to my daughter a few times, and I wonder, I'm like, is that like the right lesson? Is that the right aphorism to? It might be like almost too heavy, but let's not go down that.
A quick note on that: you can tell how much somebody's how much they felt through their pain, and how much able they are to feel hurt based on how much they talk poorly to people. which is another way to lobby their hurt that they haven't felt and place it on other people.
Cool. So gossiping, effectively, or talking shit.
Which is like, I feel this thing and I'm feeling too much of it, so I need a place to place it because I can't feel it and diffuse it myself. So let me just validate that I feel this way by talking bad about the other person.
Wow. I always was aware of my, when I would talk shit about other people. So now it's just in my own head sometimes. Now it's really in my own head. But I never thought of it as that. It's that, like, I have nowhere. Can you say that again? It's like you have nowhere to put that feeling. And so you have to like lash out, but you won't lash out directly to the person that hurt you. So you lash out indirectly. You hurt them in another, like indirectly said.
Yeah, totally. You're looking for a place to diffuse and dissipate and displace the emotion because you haven't been able to fully feel it, which is what takes the charge away. So the easiest thing is just, speak to other people to validate the experience of it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. So we got to both. You're going to paint three extremes. So we have, the person that goes inward and just represses. You got the Andrew Tate lasher. And you said there was a third path.
Yeah.
The middle way.
It's like the first person continues getting abused. The second person responds to abuse with abuse. The third person feels it fully and says, I'm not willing to stand for abuse, so here's what I'm going to do if it continues to happen.
Really? So is that effectively standing up for themselves verbally?
Sure. Oh, wow. I mean, to me, it looks like usually setting a boundary, which is like, hey, Khe, if you're going to constantly tell me I suck, like, I'm not willing to be in this relationship. And you notice that's not just being like, okay, let me just take that into flak. Nor is that responding with her to being like, well, you think I suck? No, you suck that, like getting, and it's more like, whoa, I feel how much that hurts because I felt the anger. Underneath the anger is hurt. But I feel how much that hurts. And if I don't want to be in relationships that feel it hurts so much, here's my boundary. That's the easiest way to explain it. Underneath the anger is the hurt. And when you feel authentically the hurt, you know what you need to keep yourself safe.
Wow. Which oftentimes is a boundary. And so I could see that obviously it makes I think about relationships that I've had or that I've observed that are healthy and unhealthy, like the unhealthy ones. And I guess I never thought about it through this lens, but it seems like a lot of the unhealthy ones, the boundaries are just completely out of whack. Emotional boundaries.
Which kills all the passion.
Yeah.
Because if you're staying around people that you just have to push down all your emotions, it's not you're just pushing down, you're pushing down everything you care about. Passion goes when the anger doesn't flow, because the anger tells us what we care about. And if we're pushing down what we care about, then we can't connect to our passion.
Damn. So,
and I want to be clear because I could see people taking this as like, great, I'm going to go yell at my partner. That's not the recommendation. The recommendation is go find a healthy expression of your anger that isn't outletting on anyone or anything else, and then see what conversation or what action wants to be taken.
I was wondering, so you work with men at an individual level, at a group level, in a group setting as well. If you were to kind of tease out, either what we discussed, or I would say like where people are the most stuck when it comes to this kind of issue of healthy masculinity, what have you observed kind of empirically? I mean, because we've been talking a lot of like examples.
I would say it's not knowing how to welcome range of emotions and how to feel it. And I know that's just circling in what we're saying, but if you don't actually know how to feel it, you don't know how to show up authentically as yourself.
Yeah. And so how does that feeling, because I think many people would say, well, I'll go meditate, or I'll go, I'm trying to think of, and maybe you have one, but like, let's say an example might be, you start a company with a friend and your business partner screws you over, like either, screws you over somehow. Maybe like, so this would be extreme. They steal money from you, but so there's this range of emotions, right? Anger being probably an evident one. Shame, like I can't believe this has happened to me. Sadness, like I trusted this person, I love this person. And maybe like to be very specific, like maybe in this example, the person like sees their partner's phone open and they look at the phone and they see like this web of lies, like in one email. I think this is where I would have gotten stuck here 6 months ago. To experience the full range of emotions in that moment. You're reading this email that shows how your good friend / co-founder betrayed you. What does experiencing the full range of emotions actually look like? I know we're maybe circling the wagons here a bit.
Yeah, I think this is important. I think a lot of people, when we talk about feeling our feelings, they think it's brooding in it, ruminating, talking about it, venting, a lot.
Crying.
Crying is a really good form of release. A lot of where I've learned, and I'm sure concepts I pulled from or regurgitated is from Joe Hudson, a mutual sort of person we know. And he was once, I remember.
Future podcast guest.
Great. I remember he was once talking about, he's like, I was sitting in a boardroom and I was saying, I'm so angry. And the guy looked at me, he said, you're not angry. You're just talking about how you're angry to not feel it. And so to me, there's a different range of like what feeling sadness looks like, which often is crying. Feeling anger looks like, what feeling shame, what feeling fear is. And I know I'm actually feeling it if there is some form of release happening in my system. And that release usually does come through for me crying, where it's like a 5, maximum 10-minute sob. And then the whole situation feels clear and light, actually.
Yeah.
If you're getting mentally stuck on the situation, or if every time it comes up, you feel very tired, or if you feel the urge to just go to your phone or eat a sugary snack, or if you feel this urgency to speak and lash out at the person, you are still in the emotional experience.
Yeah. But I still feel like, again, maybe I'm trying to analyze something that's very felt using words. And maybe that's where I'm getting stuck. I feel like there's crying, and then with anger, there's yelling. My wife did Hoffman Institute, which is inner child work for those who aren't familiar. So how some of your childhood patterns, pains, wounds show up in adulthood. And she said that she gave me like some of the exercise. She told me some of the exercise they do is like in one of them, they like have you like take a baseball bat and like to a pillow. And I don't think the pillow is a person, but it's like represents the way a person had hurt you. So you're like literally like beating the shit out of this pillow with a baseball bat. There's writing like an angry letter to someone who has hurt you. I'll tell you a story that I don't think I've ever said on this podcast, but we were, and I'll plant the seed because like, what is the release of anger? What does the release of emotion look like? We were in a marriage therapy session and we were talking about how one of my coping mechanism is I just emotionally shut down. So I'm the repressor and like the emotional repressor in many ways. And the coach was egging me. He's like, well, what are you really afraid of? What do you like? And I would say, I fear irrelevance. I fear people not like seeing me. I fear like I don't matter. And he's like, Khe, tell me you matter. Say to me, I fucking matter. And so I told we're 4, like my wife and I and the coaching couple on Zoom. So I said, I fucking matter. And he's like, no. He's like, he's like, is anyone home? No one's home. He's like, I want you to yell, I fucking matter. I couldn't do it. I couldn't yell, I fucking matter. And finally, I'm like, all right, I'm just going to surrender. I'm just going to yell. I yelled it as loud as I could. And I immediately burst into tears.
Yeah.
Like, I have never seen myself cry that way.
Yeah.
my wife has never seen me. She's only seen me cry once when I lost a friend. My wife's never seen me cry that way. And so I guess to some extent, I am answering the question but I know that people who have never felt the range of the emotions, it can be hard to describe to them what that feels like because you're using words to describe feelings. So anyway, I'll stop there.
I think it's just important to point out, I've been learning this really potently, like up to this episode.
Yeah.
When anger starts flowing, a lot of grief is going to happen. Like, holy shit, I haven't said I fucking matter. So and in hiding from that anger that I don't matter, I've allowed myself to stay in irrelevance. Or holy shit, I haven't allowed my anger when I've gotten abused and so I've allowed myself to stay there. And there's a huge grieving process that can happen after that feels like the natural sort of completion of it. You're like, wow, I've been attracting people who abuse me because that's what I thought I was worth. And there's a huge grief to allow in that of like, wow, this is the love that I thought I was worth or I deserved. This was the relevance that I thought that I held.
So you're grieving that the end of that kind of old story of yourself?
Yeah. How much the emotions have been held in and how much they've held you in place of the thing that you actually didn't want.
Yeah. Wow. And so to go back, is there a way to, if someone's listening to this and they're like, I want to be more connected to my feelings. I want to learn how to regulate my emotions. You actually had left me that WhatsApp message with some great little exercises. How does one take that first step? And remember, you are talking. I know you know the type, but you're talking to some very brainy emotional repressors on the other end of this podcast.
Yeah, it's different for everyone, and it's also totally natural and intuitive because as children, we all came into the world learning through emotions. So I would say the first step is when I feel a certain sense of urgency or like a scripted automatic thing is happening. When I get that moment of awareness of, ooh, I'm rushing towards something and I don't know why, to be able to slow down, breathe into it, see where I can feel tension in my body and ask the question, what if this experience had a home? What if I didn't need to pull away from these sensations? And to see what arises from that space. For me, I work with different emotions differently, but all kind of similarly, which is how can I just love them all? Sadness has like a noise to it that allows for tears. Anger has also a noise, but a verbal, audible expression of the anger. Fear, I really try and just love as deeply as I can. But I think starting to familiarize with what's the tension I'm feeling and what if this had a home? And what if I didn't have to leave this physiologic tension that I'm feeling right now?
Yeah. I do think I've been observing when being an online personality, it's just a crazy world out there with a lot of envy and a lot of posturing and a lot of aggression, so to speak, and ego. And I can get very envious of people who I think are more successful than me or further down the path than me or that are doing things better than me. And it's funny, I've been sitting with that. It can be envy, it can be like I gossip about them in my own head, start telling stories. And what I've tried to do is to just basically, instead of doing that, just observe it and then drop into my body and just feel whatever I'm feeling. And I don't know if I'm doing it right, but a lot of times, it's like, oh, I feel this kind of pinch in my abdomen, or I feel this sensation in my neck, my shoulders, my traps, and just kind of breathing through it, observing it. And then something happens, or it just kind of it dissolves, right?
Yeah.
You're like, oh, that was, because again, I think normally I would have been tempted to just go have a piece of chocolate. Like, oh, this person pissed me off. I'm jealous of this person. Let me go eat a potato chip. And then just the salt just just numbs me for that
Totally.
second, and I can kind of move on to the next thing. It just, is that akin? Like, is
Totally.
it?
I think that's really beautiful. And I think you can even layer on something there, which is like the somatic tension that we have. If we realize those are usually some emotional experience manifesting in our body, telling us how our body is experiencing the world. So they really are these like intelligent data points that want to let us know things. I'll start sometimes by feeling the constriction or the heaviness or the tightness. And as I'm feeling it and like bringing my awareness to couple to it, like my total awareness is in the sensation, I'll just start to ask it questions of like, what do you want me to know? Or like in your instance, if that was me, I would start to ask like, what about them feels like more? What about them makes you feel like not enough? Like, what if I was enough? Or how do you think you're not enough in this moment? And starting then to learn from those data points of what they want you to know and how you can love whatever answer comes up as a pathway to deeply feel it and release it.
Yeah. I think it's beautiful. And I thank you for that, because I think like you're way ahead on this kind of journey. I'm, a tourist, but I've been to a few spots. And then our listeners, I think some of them are obviously on all the spectrum. I say many of them are probably like, I get it, but I've never experienced it truly. And so I think I really thank you for really like explaining it in such a kind of clear, but also honest way. I feel like we veered off a lot on the actual topic of healthy masculinity, but is there something as it relates to healthy masculinity that is important that you don't think we've covered?
I think that there's an idea that like in dating, this is common in like the lexicon of reclaiming masculinity of like, male should make the choice. Like, tell me where we're going to dinner. I want you to lead. My understanding of this is the male leads to help others lead themselves. So it's not that I'm making the choices, but I am empowering others to make more choice. It's I am leading you to be able to lead yourself. Anything else feels like it's stripping down people's autonomy. It's like, rather than leading and telling us like what we should do today, I can lean in saying, hey, I'm really curious and wanting to know what you want to do today. And like coming from that same leadership, confident energy that actually empowers more sovereignty and autonomy. There's a really good quote by a great philosopher, Forrest Landry. Love is that which empowers more choice.
Wow. Love is that empowers more choice. And so is this in the context of men being quote unquote told to take more control? Or is that this kind of, you're saying in dating circles?
I think I hear this.
I'm very unfamiliar.
Yeah.
One thing I don't have an opinion on is what's going on in dating circles these days.
I think, in a lot of the dating circles or the conscious circles where people are starting to play with relationships and intimacy and tantra and the like core energies archetypically of what is masculine and feminine, it's like, male, take the lead. I want you to tell me where to go. And it's like, I want to take the lead to allow you to lead yourself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. And how, like, if I'm thinking of something very basic, but like, oh, where are we going to go eat dinner? Is that kind of a healthy transfer of agency without, because, like, is that, I don't know, is that even the right example of like, a couple deciding on where to go? Or is that too watered down?
I think it's not about the external example. It's about the internal situation of it, which is if I'm escaping my indecisiveness to have you pick, that's a good sign of what people are talking about taking the lead. But if I'm actually like really clear that, oh, I know you are escaping your indecisiveness and aren't able to make these decisions, and I want you to be able to have your own intrinsic compass, then like, how can I compassionately help you be there? So it's not
That's I mean, I can speak from experience is that in our marriage, I'm very decisive and my wife is very indecisive. And we both know the accompanying stories where I probably have more egoic tendencies, dominant tendencies, and she has more low confidence. And so, I've actually said like, well, if you want me to decide, just tell me to, something like that. That's like, but what I'm doing in that case is stomping over her agency and just being like, there is a discomfort there, and I'm just going to overpower it just to make that discomfort go away for you, because then it goes away for me.
Precisely.
Where instead it's like, how can I elevate you without patronizing you?
Yeah.
While still knowing that, like I am supportive and I am decisive, there's like a, wow, okay.
The most loving thing, you named it perfectly, where if the wife or the partner's indecisive, it's usually we're not okay with it, because it's like, what would I have to feel if you didn't know? And then I'd have to feel indecisive and like we don't know what we're doing and I don't want to feel that. And if you're able and okay with, no, we don't know, and I'm totally okay, and I can love you and not knowing, and that you don't know, and you can take the space to, for the first time in probably a while, not need to be pushed through that discomfort or forced right out of it. Like, okay, here's the answer. And it's totally okay. Like, to me, that's a really strong, like healthy masculine.
Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. Scott, man, we went, what a conversation. We could talk for hours. So
Likewise.
Really, I really, these are beautiful conversations. These are not conversations that I have frequently, if at all. And so I'm really grateful to have that conversation, with you, selfishly, to have it. And also that we can, share this gift with our community and our listeners. So really, thank you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be able to share, and conversing with you always just pulls out new layers of things that I am also an appreciation to be able to think and feel.
Awesome. Where can our listeners go learn more about you, connect with you?
Yeah, mostly on Instagram, Twitter too, not as active. There's a website, but it's old and it won't tell you about my current offerings or what I'm doing. That's in process and to be coming, but I would say Instagram or Twitter are good places to connect.
Awesome. And we'll put links to all those in the show notes.
Cool.
Scott, thank you so much.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, man.